if that's okay. Get more personal attention here then. We're presenting the sewer project for between Lakeport and Bridgeport. There's about 350 units, I think. And Taylor's going to give you all the technical rundown on this. We wanted to present it before COVID, and then COVID happened, and one thing led to another, and here we are. This thing started out about a $14 million project, 12, 14, now we're up to 20. So that's why we want to get this show on the road here while there's money available and try to get this thing done. So with that, I'll turn it over to Taylor Botar from Bartlett Units.
Thanks, John, and I think we have presentations printed out. We don't have a projector just because it's tough to see in the the daylight here. So I'll follow along with the presentation. I believe this is posted on the town's website. If you want to go look at it there, I think we also have our recordings from the other week. If you guys want to check those out, but we'll run through the same thing here. We're hoping that this will be informative. We're just in the planning stages of this project, as Supervisor Becker mentioned. If you guys have questions, certainly we'll stick around after this. Feel free to ask any questions that you guys do have. So, just generally speaking, the project area that we're looking at, you can see the map here. We're on the western end, Lucas Road, the Lakeshore area. To the west, Bushnell Shore Road. So this is kind of the last gap of unsewered area on the southern shore of Oneida Lake. You guys, I'm sure, might remember, I think back 2015 plus or minus, we had done the sewer project in Bridgeport. That did include a sewer line, a force main that we call it, that went down Route 31 and tied into the West Halton sewers here in Lakeport. So, jumping into the slides, I'll start with slide 1, project drivers. As I'm sure you guys are familiar with, some of these septic systems could be aging, non-compliant. I know, a lot of these houses along the lakeshore historically were seasonal camps, dating back 50 years, that have since been converted into year-round homes. You guys are very familiar with the seasonal groundwater table that could be impacting those septic systems. The small lot sizes, I mentioned the year-round home conversions. There's potential public risk, health risk there. Nearby lakeshore residents if that septic system is non-compliant, and certainly environmental risk to the Oneida Lake water quality that we all do enjoy. Proposed service area, this is the next slide. Kind of the same as the map that we have here. We're really looking to extend the public sewers that are already in place. We would be taking everything along the lakeshore and connecting that into the Route 31 force main that is already there. Actually, a little bit short of 300, about 278 equivalent dwelling units is the term we use. A single-family home is one unit. If you had a property that had 2 houses on it, for example, that would be 2 units. That's how that works to do our assessment.
What if you have a property that you don't?
If you have a vacant property and it's a buildable lot, so it's got enough acreage on it so that you could build it in the future, it would be 0.5 units. The reason it's 0.5 is because you would have access to that sewer line in the future when you have to build. If it's a really small lot that is not buildable, it's too small for the town's code, then that would be 0 units.
So how does that, I have a lot that's an acre. How would that work out as far as the $130?
I'll get to that. Okay. We'll talk through that on one of these future slides. So next slide, down. You see this EOLWPAP, EOLWAP. So that's called the East Oneida Lake Water Pollution Abatement Program. This was set up back in the 70s when the village of Silver Beach, as well as out of Sullivan, Lenox, Verona, and Vienna got together and decided that they wanted to put in a public sewer system. So the village of Silver Beach, they are the provider of the treatment. They have the wastewater treatment plant that's existing where all this will be connected into. This map that we tried to show here is just to give you an idea of all the existing sewer infrastructure that's already in place that we would be connecting into, going through town of Lenox and then Verona before we got to the village of Silver Beach. So there is some infrastructure. This would all be town-owned infrastructure. There's existing infrastructure downstream that is technically owned and operated by Dealwalk, provided by the village of Silver Beach. Some of these main pump stations and interceptors that we would be tied into. So next slide, we have proposed improvements. So we're again at a planning stage right now, so we haven't done a detailed design, we've done a conceptual layout. And what we've laid out here is a gravity sewer infrastructure system, about 17,500 feet of 8-inch gravity main. That would include about 242 gravity lateral connections. Those are the pipes that would extend off the main towards each house. We call those laterals. And then, with it being a gravity system, what we're tying into a pressurized force main on Route 31, this red line here. We would need to have centralized pump stations. We're outlining 3 of them right now. Don't get focused too much on their exact locations. Again, this is just conceptual. That doesn't mean that's where they're going to go, but the gravity sewers would flow into these main pump stations, which would then pump it out and tie into that Route 31 force main that's already in place. So we would have 3 of those north of Route 31. And then on the southern side, we have Glad Drive and Mid-Lake Meadows. These are just small little dead-end roads, as you guys know. Just because of economics, it doesn't make sense to put in one of these large, costly pump stations for just a few houses. So we would look to use grinder pumps. If you guys aren't familiar with these, we have about over 500 of them for each house over in Bridgeport, along the lakeshore area there. That's this picture that you're seeing here. This is an actual grinder pump. Most of this is buried. All you see is the little green top. It's essentially a little pump for each house, and they do exactly what they say. They grind and they pump. It's kind of like a glorified sump pump. There's not too much to them. But we would have 18 of those on serving those two roads south of 31, about 1,300 linear feet of a 2-inch low pressure main. Because those pumps are grinding, you can pump through a very small diameter main, and those would tie in again to our 12-inch force main on Route 31. Everything is going east, so the Route 31 force main goes to what we call the West Sullivan Equalization Tank and Pump Station. I think we have a picture of this on the next slide. Yes, have that slide, also proposed improvements. If you've seen the blue tank, kind of in the back on the south side of Route 31, that is an equalization tank. The idea there is, flows, the sanitary sewer flows will fluctuate, particularly during like a rainstorm or wet weather event. That water does make its way into the sewer system in various different ways, and we want to try to balance out those peak flows and keep it a steady flow to help protect the downstream infrastructure. So, because we're adding more flow, more sanitary load to this system, there's already one tank there. We would probably look to install a second tank right next to it, just to add to our equalization capacity. Next slide, again, still on proposed improvements. These are actual pump stations, kind of the main pump stations that I referenced, 3 of those north of Route 31. These are actual ones that we have in Bridgeport. I have 2 different styles. They're based on size. The first one is on Bridgeport Kirkville Road. There's actually no building structure. You have a couple of subsurface structures, what we call a wet well and a valve vault. We do have an emergency generator and then a electrical backbone that you do see. These stations might be small enough to be of that size. We do have a bigger one in Bridgeport. This is back behind the fire hall there. This does have a building structure to it, as well as emergency generator. So I just want to give you guys a couple examples of what we might be looking to install in centralized pump stations. Again, north of 31. Just a reiterate, these locations are conceptual. Certainly we would need to acquire property to install those. So the actual locations would change. It wouldn't be until we got further down in the process into an actual design phase. We're in the planning stage right now, wanting to see if the public's interested, if we can get funding for it. The actual location will be determined during the formal design phase. The next slide I think we have is operation and maintenance. I mentioned it earlier, so the town would have ownership of the gravity system within the right-of-way generally. That would be the sewer main, as well as these main pumping stations. Resident ownership would typically be from the house to the right-of-way. So there's the lateral 4-inch pipe that would have to be extended from whether it's going to your current septic system to the right-of-way. My one caveat with that is we're hoping to get enough funding to actually do that connection through the project. So in that case, we would need an easement, and the town would actually own that lateral to the connection point that's on the project right now. With the grinder pumps, got 18 of those south of Route 31. The town owns and operates over 500 of them in Bridgeport. Same thing for these. The resident ownership, it would be from their house to the grinder pump, just that 4-inch lateral pipe. The homeowner would be responsible for the electrical cost. It is not a lot. These are little like 1/2 horsepower pumps that are just running intermittently. There's a 80-gallon, what we call wet well, but an 80-gallon holding tank, if you will, where that sewage would flow into, and then the pump would pump that out. So again, they're only going to run a few times a day, if that. But because they are connected to, your electrical source at your house, we're not going to have standby emergency generators for each one like we do these centralized stations. There actually is a generator receptacle, like a plug-in, for just the grinder pump itself. The town does have portable generators if you ever ran into an extended power loss situation over the course of multiple days where you're exceeding that 80 gallons of storage. We'd be able to pump those out in that emergency situation. Next slide is user cost analysis, and that's where we're going to get to this vacant property, which is a great point. So total project cost, as the supervisor mentioned, I think we initially did this study in 2015. Costs have certainly gone up, particularly the last couple of years. We've been revising this estimate to account for recent inflation. We're up to about a $21 million project. And we want to be able to go out there and get a lot of this funding that's available. I'm sure you folks have heard a lot about the infrastructure bill this past fall. That money's starting to make its way out into the communities. Certainly we want to be able to try to secure as much of that as we can to make a $21 million project affordable to the residents. So we have an estimated user cost. This does assume some hypotheticals with grant funding and financing. But the first line item is debt service. And what we mean by debt service is the cost to pay off the loan for the construction project. Typically it's either a 30 or 38-year loan, depending on the state or federal funding agency that would be using. The town estimated O&M about $130 per year per unit. That's to maintain these larger pump stations as well as the grinder pumps. The maintenance on the gravity system is relatively minor. Maybe some routine flushing. Of course, any repairs that might need to be done. And then the last one, we have this treatment and transmission cost. So this is actually from the village of Sylvan Beach for them to both treat and transmit the sewage through their the EWAP infrastructure. So that gets us up to a total estimated annual cost of about $1,130 per unit. Now, if you had a vacant property, to your point there, and you are not connected to the system, there's no house, so there's no town operation and maintenance, there's no treatment and transmission costs. You cross those two off immediately, then you have a half of a unit. So it'd be 0.5 times the 677 is what a vacant property would be paying for. That's for that future use of the sewer system. Looking to the next page here, which would be potential funding. We do have just a few of the existing programs outlined right now. The wild card down at the bottom is that infrastructure bill. But just to walk through some of the different funding that we're hoping to secure. The first one is through New York State. They have the Water Infrastructure Improvement Act grant, aka WIA. So this program provides the lesser of $5 million or 25% of your total project cost. So that's one that we'd hopefully be able to secure. Another program, this is for the loan side of things. So you have grant funding you're trying to secure, then there's always a balance that you have to finance via loan. And that one of the avenues is New York State EFC, so that's the Environmental Facilities Corporation. It's kind of the financing arm for water and sewer projects for New York State. They have something called the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, lots of acronyms in this world, CWSRF. This program offers AAA market rate financing or subsidized loans. That subsidy is based on, they will actually score this project amongst other projects across the state, different metrics such as water quality, public health, financial need, median household income, those types of things. And depending on our score and how we rank against the other projects across the state, will determine how much subsidized financing we might be able to qualify for this project. Another avenue would be USDA Rural Development. Rural Development offers market rate and subsidized loans as well. Also grant funding based on need. They have a targeted financing based on median household income, 38-year. We think this project will qualify for what they call an intermediate rate, which is like a subsidized rate of market. Just as an example, for the Bridgeport project that we did in 2015, that had both EFC financing and it had rural development grant. So a lot of times we look to pick and pull different financing grant options from different agencies, pull together whatever the best funding package that we can, certainly to make the project as affordable as we can for the residents. And then this last one I did touch on earlier, just again, this Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, it's the infrastructure bill from this past fall. This is still very new in the funding world as to how they're going to distribute the money. I believe New York State got, for this year, just shy of an extra $500 million for water and sewer projects. They haven't really changed the structure of these programs, such as grant limits and things like that. More information is coming out with that, so we want to be ready for any potential opportunities that come from that. There's lots of money that's going to be out there in the next 5 years. So what's next? Our last slide here. So we're in what we call the district formation stage. Because you're in town, whether you're doing a sewer project, a water project, lighting project, stormwater, for New York State town law, you have to form a sewer district. There's a process for that where we put together what we call map plan and report. We drafted that document. We haven't formalized it just yet. We're doing our outreach right now, but there will be opportunities throughout that district formation process to petition the town board for or against the project. I certainly can't speak for the town board, but I think they would welcome your input and certainly want to act in your best interest. Once district formation is done, we'll do the environmental review, also known as SEQR, State Environmental Quality Review. That's usually a 2 to 3 month process where we put together a bunch of information for the town board to consider. They would then make a environmental determination, whether there's a negative or positive impact to the environment. And then the last piece is something called a bond resolution. So this is another thing for the town board. They would pass a resolution which authorizes the town to secure financing bonds for the total project cost. So the reason I'm mentioning these 3 steps first is all 3 of those has to be done fully complete before we can go get any of that funding that I talked about on the previous slide. So there's always lots of talk of there's grants out there, there's money, which there is, but there are steps that we have to go through first before we can even submit an application. We'll simply reject our application because they're not done. So it's a little bit, we're trying to outline costs, we're trying to give you guys an idea of what the user cost will be, but we don't know exactly what our funding is, and certainly we're going to try to get as much as we can to bring that user cost down as far as we can. So with that, I do have kind of a schedule outline. This is preliminary on the right-hand side here. District formation this year. There are funding cycles, deadlines when these grant applications come out every year. So I have just as a placeholder, we'll look to secure a funding package next year in 2023. That would put us in a design phase in 2024. Best case scenario, we're starting construction in 2025, and you're wrapping things up in 2026. So you guys can see that we're really at step one of a very long process before you have, best case scenario, we have our project complete by 4 years from now in 2026. So with that, that's all I had. Certainly we can kind of do an open Q&A session. Alex and I, my coworker here, will stick around if you guys want to have some one-on-one discussions as well. Really appreciate you guys coming out. Again, all this information is posted on the town's website. We're going to do this same workshop this evening at 6 o'clock. We're going to do it again tomorrow, also at 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock if you want to hear it again. Let your neighbors know. Thank you. Yes, sir.
District formation was back, 2014 when we did it the first time? Phase 1 and phase 2. So phase 1 was down 31, phase 2 is what you're going to do now.
So we, as part of that district formation, we did not form a district around this yellow area. We did for the purple area, but not the yellow.
But wasn't funding already set aside for that initially back in 2014?
For the purple area.
Just for the purple area?
Yes.
So there's no money allowed for phase 2?
We're going to go get it.
Well, when will that cost take effect?
The user cost?
2026. Right?
Yeah, it wouldn't be until the project's done.
Okay. And what about the hookup cost?
So that's something that we want to get included in the project, but depending on what those funding levels are, what we did in Bridgeport, just as an example, we stopped at the property line, generally speaking, and then the residents were responsible for doing the reconnecting lateral into that new sewer. So that would be also in 2026 or later, whenever you so choose to connect to the system. So in Bridgeport, connection was not required. If you had a deficient septic system and you had a violation from the health department, it was. But connection to the system was generally optional.
Yeah, but the town had a problem with their contractors. I remember because I went to a town board meeting. They had initially $75 a foot for the contractors, the folks who charged the homeowner. But then it went up, the contractors were starting to charge $125 a foot. So they were going above the $75 that was actually supposed to be charged.
Because we limited the pool, see, they all got together.
Right, so in Bridgeport, which might not be this case, because we're hoping to do the connection all through the project, so you guys don't have to worry about that, but the work on private property was the responsible of the homeowner going out and hiring a contractor, whoever you choose. So we had put together an estimate just to give people an idea. This was me doing an estimate. He is the engineer, not as the contractor. And it sounded like some of the contractors were charging more than what I had initially estimated.
Now another thing, you can opt out of this, right? You got a good system.
So that's going to depend on if we connect everybody into the system or not. Whether you're in the district or not, I mean, once you're in the district, you're in the district. If we set it up so that we don't connect everybody through the project, like Bridgeport, then it was optional connecting to the system. So in that case, if we go to the user cost.
Yeah, but my question is, my septic system, I already had dye test on the whole thing passed.
Yep.
So I'm kind of, do I or don't I? You know, and I found out the guy in Peachtree Road, he opted out and paid a one-time fee, and then he had to pay so much a year after that.
Yeah, that's, I guess what I'm kind of getting to here. So if you were to opt out of the system, you don't connect into it, just kind of like a vacant property, because you're not using it, you don't have to pay for O&M. You don't have to pay for the treatment and transmission costs because you're not putting anything into the system. What you are still responsible for is this debt service cost, which is the construction to put the infrastructure in place. And the reason being is, let's say something did happen to your septic system down the road, you do have the sewer main there available to you connect to it in the future.
So you could hook into it later.
Yes.
I got a question.
Yep.
On this sewer district map, how is it determined what's gonna be a force main and what's gonna be a gravity main? And then what was it, and the low pressure? Was there a sample profile run through these areas?
Yes. So we did do a conceptual profile to figure out how many of these main pumping stations that we would have needed. So we're trying to pick up the whole lakeshore stretch with gravity sewer. We did try to serve, I guess what I'll call the spurs, but basically between Route 31 and the lake. Serve all the houses as we could with gravity sewer. But then, the force mains are from the pump station back out to Route 31. So you have to tie in there.
Also, was there consideration of running that gravity line in the lake bottom?
We don't want to do that.
Wasn't that done over 3 Mile Bay?
So that was to get, I believe, had to do with like the lake. So you had to go up and around. There's a service area. It'd be better if I had a map. But basically, it would be equivalent where you had a bunch of sewers here, and they had to get them like over here, so they ran a line through the lake. But that was just a transmission main.
The reason I ask that question is there's quite a few houses in spotty locations along there that are maybe 25 or 30 feet above the lake itself.
Mm-hmm.
And the ground at each one of those sites slopes toward the lake.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you run back 100 feet from that dwelling or whatever the building would happen to be, your force main or your gravity main's probably going to end up to be 50 or 60 feet deep.
That would be too deep.
Pardon?
That would be too deep.
Well, that's where I'm going, because if you run them downhill on the lake shore, they're all downhill to the lake.
And that's actually the point this gentleman brought up before we started the workshop. And that is something that, we could look to do. Again, I'm just calling this conceptual, where you would run the main, not in the lake, but on the front side, the lake side to the front, right?
Yes.
I learned that in Bridgeport. Run the sewer main along the front side of the house, it's basically between the house and the lake. But now we need easements. East Sullivan does have that, so just down the road, we do have that in places.
Where I happen to